Hey guys, Chris Potter here, and today I'm going to be doing a review on our progress through the Battle of Dazar'alor. This progress race was once again very special due to the fact that we were live streaming from the Red Bull Gaming Sphere London, with the support of MSI, Discord and Wowhead. This time the production quality was even bigger and the support and viewership we had was even crazier, so a big thanks to all of you for watching. Now let's get into the raid tier. We awoke on the day of the reset knowing that the NA guilds had been blasting through the raid the night before, and we were surprised to see them already at 7 out of 9 bosses. The race had not even begun for us, and we were scared that the NA guilds would finish the raid that day. The first boss, Champion of Light, ended up being the easiest first boss there has been for a while. Even Talok from Uldir had a one-shot mechanic, but this boss was just so easy. The setup we used on this boss was mostly to optimize loot for DPS, so you can see we had a lot of the main healers, myself included, being benched, so that more DPS players could come in and heal on their off-specs to get more loot. The boss was incredibly easy, and even with the spinning hammers, the mythic mechanic that you have to dodge, it doesn't even hit you that hard if you get hit. This boss was an easy one-shot, and we moved on to GRONG. GRONG was quite a step up from the first boss, but once again, we were using mostly off-spec healers here to optimize loot for DPS. The staying as one group turned out to be a lot more damage taken than splitting into 2 or 3 groups, and the healing gained for being only one group really wasn't worth the extra movement and damage you take compared to being 2 groups. We ended up 6 healing this boss just to make it easy, though definitely with proper play and main healers in, it could have been 5 or even 4 healed. The DPS check was just not relevant enough to risk any extra wipes. The main mechanic of this fight is the Tantrum, in which GRONG slams the ground and does increasing damage based on his rage bar. The idea is to not let him reach full rage by killing and interrupting the adds that jump down, and then using the orb that you pick up after killing them on the boss. The orb depletes GRONG's energy and instantly triggers a Tantrum. It's a decent fight, but with the split ranged camps and DPS running out to switch to the monkey adds and quite regular movement, it's actually not that fun to heal as you would think. After 3 pulls we killed the boss and we move on to JADEFIRE Masters. JADEFIRE Masters turned out to be way easier than on testing. It's a very fun little fight with interesting mechanics such as the multi-sided strike where you get teleported up into the air and you have to turn your character to face the monk images charging at you. The maze is also a funny little part of the fight. Actually on our kill I ended up messing up and I got bounced around between 4 or 5 orbs repeatedly to the point where I just took my hands off the keyboard and mouse and I was literally just laughing out loud. Luckily the boss is so easy that you can do things like that and still kill it though. We had seen from the NA streams that the night before, if you just nuke down Mestra, the fight becomes very easy and the last phase is basically just AFK and nuke the boss. We face rolled the fight and collected our loot in a surprising but pleasant one shot. Opulence turned out to be the first boss where you had to play decent. It's an interesting and fun boss in that the raid is split into 2 halves for the majority of the fight, before meeting up as one team at the end. The Fierce rooms are quite boring, and are just don't stand in the fire and dodge bad things. Once you get to the gem room, your raid becomes insanely more powerful. The gems you can pick up do things such as give the tanks a massive absorb, healers healing spells apply a damage buff, DPS can stack up a damage taken on the boss while also stacking up a damage done, they can get 100% crit, they're very powerful. The downside of these are that shortly after picking them up, you're going to take massive shadow damage that will one-shot you. Luckily, one of the gems also applies a 90% damage reduction to shadow damage, and it's a healer's job to make sure everyone is covered with the buff so they don't get one-shot by this. The last phase has an exciting feel to it, with the raid being so strongly buffed. The large waves of adds are spawning, and you have to AoE them down, the room is filling up with gold that you might have to run out and place. It's quite a fun last phase. The mythic mechanic of players being swapped between the 2 sides periodically caused us quite a few problems, until we realised that if you just stand still after being teleported, you're actually immune to all damage. So we had a lot of deaths where people were getting teleported, and like instantly dying to stuff because they ran into fire or something, but if you just stand still, you don't take any damage. The boss died fairly quickly after 10 pulls, which is actually the first double-digit pull counter so far, and we moved on to the Conclave of the Chosen. Conclave of the Chosen is a boss that looks very hectic, and sometimes is, but generally there's just a few mechanics going on at once that need to be paid attention to. The mythic change is that there are an increasing number of curse debuffs out on the raid, and they make the players they are on unhealable. So curse spells are very important here to regularly dispel people when they drop low, so that you can heal them up. Once we figured out that we should delay killing the first boss to time the mechanics better, the boss followed suit of the other bosses so far and was very easy. Conclave was a pretty fun fight with interesting mechanics, except for that stupid frog whose leap visual I could never see, hidden under all the AoE spell effects and players, and I got very tilted getting knocked away by that. We killed Conclave only after 7 pulls and moved on to King Rastakhan. We were expecting King Rastakhan to be a much harder fight than it was, and it was the first fight where we didn't make the setup only based on what DPS needed loot. Bringing two Shamans to nullify the mind control totems by using Tremor totems and using the wall tactic for the inside phase made it very easy. Basically, halfway through the fight, half of the raid is sent down to the Bonswandi phase, where there are lots of orbs to dodge and you take increasing damage. The idea is that you nuke him down fast while dodging so that you don't need to reset your stacks too often, because resetting stacks does raid-wide damage in the other realm. I think we actually got linked a clip from Twitch chat where we saw an NA guild building a wall of death doors, which essentially absorb the orbs that you need to dodge, and the raid hiding behind the wall. So with this strategy, the inside phase became much easier, and after only 7 pulls, we were able to kill the boss. We were at High Tink and MEKKATORQUE pretty early in the day, around 2 PM, so we were feeling very hyped that we were blasting through the raid much quicker than Limit had done, and were hopeful to overtake them before they went to sleep. However, we were gravely mistaken. I think Deep Shades put it in another interview, he said, we were playing like a World 1000 guild. Which is pretty true. There are lots of mechanics on the fight, and they can quickly wipe you, but none of them are super difficult, and we should have played much better. All of us, myself included, were not playing at our best. However, there are some difficult times in the fight, such as the Wormhole Generator, which teleports the raid to one place position, polymorphs 2 other members of the raid, and knock 2 members of the raid up into the air. And at the same time, there's a blast off going on, where he jumps up on the raid and does big damage to the raid, but also does one-shot damage if you're actually standing in the circle that he jumped. Particularly as a healer, I felt I had to play very good during this time. I had to be ready to instantly Transcendence if I was one of the players knocked up, while being ready to instantly dispel one of the polymorphs, because if you don't dispel them, they're going to die from being in the circle, while also being ready to move out of the blast myself, while also maximizing HPS, because the raid takes quite heavy damage when he lands, so you need to have the raid high enough that they survive it. These crossovers were part of the fight that showed me as a player very well, I think. For the first 3 or so times, I would screw up here and like really inted. I didn't play great here at all. I would miss the Transcendence, miss the Dispel, was too slow on the Dispel, you know, something like that. But then I set my mind to it. I made a plan for every circumstance, and yeah, then I played that really well from then on, I think. After maybe 25 pulls or so, we realized that we should actually have had set positions for the Gigavolt charges, which would limit the mistakes we were making a lot. Basically, the Gigavolt charges leave pools on the ground, and they're very deadly. So it was important that we placed them properly, which we weren't doing to begin with. We were also 2-tanking without a double DK for a while, which cost us some time relearning. We were using Brewmaster and 1 DK. We then even tried 3-tanking with 2 DKs in the Brewmaster, which we would later have to relearn to 2-tanking with just the 2 Blood DKs. I think this was another mistake on our part to not instantly start with 2 Blood DKs, and we maybe wasted some time there. Yet another problem on this boss was that sometimes the blast off circles, where the boss jumps up, they would actually bug out and would not show properly the visual. While this was like semi-predictable and you knew when it was happening to just run away, it still obviously caused maybe 5 or 6 extra wipes, because in the in the stressful moments that are happening, it doesn't help when the boss's visual isn't showing properly. Our final flaw on this boss is to do with the main mechanic of the fight, where players get shrunk and must climb inside the robots to disarm them by communicating the correct codes to each other. Lots of you have probably heard of this. You may have heard that we didn't know that when shrunk, players do 99% less damage, and that we tried to nuke the boss in the last phase ignoring the last wave of shrinks. Well, that's kind of true. It's not that we didn't know, but in the moment of making the decision to do that, some of us just completely forgot about the 99% damage reduction, while some assumed that if we were doing it, it must work out to be a gain. We just trust that, oh, okay, if that's the strat we're doing, it must be worth doing. Despite getting to the boss at around 2 PM, it wasn't until much later in the day at around 11 PM, after 56 wipes, that we killed the boss. Overall, the boss is well designed and is a pretty nice fight. We were very depressed after killing it due to knowing that we had wasted a lot of time on it and completely negated the speed at which we had killed the earlier bosses. We had a few pulls on the next boss, STORMWALL Blockade, and then called the end of the first raid day, being quite far behind limit as I believe they were already on JAINA at this point. STORMWALL Blockade, a fight where the raid is once again split into two at the start of the fight, looked to be a very healing intensive, DPS intensive, and harsh mechanical fight. Until we realised that you could just bloodlust on the boats during the boss's channel where they didn't do their regular abilities, and you could just push it really quickly into the last phase. The last phase turned out to be the easier of the two phases, partly due to the fact that one of the mythic mechanics just didn't hit the raid if they were standing right on the edge of the platform. We just moved around as a group on the edge of the platform and had Just Wait solo tank or solo soak the circles that needed to be soaked. In the end, the phase was so easy that we didn't even really care too much for debuffing the ad with the tank debuff, only when it kinda got close and Sko could do it really easily. I like this fight because the first phase on the boats was very short, but very fun for the duration. There was lots of healing to do in phase 1 and the mechanics are engaging with placing the swells properly. We killed the boss after 57 attempts and we finally reached JAINA. Now, JAINA being the end boss, being the longest boss and being the hardest boss, I could probably talk about it for hours. But I'll try and keep this part brief as I believe there'll be a separate video here on the Method channel going into a lot more detail and a lot more in depth about JAINA. The main mythic mechanic for JAINA is that throughout the fight you have to be standing next to a varying number of people, between 1 and 5, or else you will get frozen in an ice block. The first thing to say about JAINA is phase 1 is incredibly long and boring. I personally think phase 1s in general should be a lot shorter and more exciting since they are the part of the fight that you will see very often. The main real challenge of the fight was the intermission to begin with. Unlike Heroic, the JAINA also spawns mirror images around the room that also shoot out frozen orbs. We had a lot of wipes to people being hit by these orbs or getting left behind because remember, you need to stay as a group as you move around the room or you'll get ice blocked. It was also important that we did this phase quickly, to not get too many stacks of the Chilling Touch debuff, which is stacking up throughout the phase, and throughout the entire fight from then on. For the majority of progress, we used Sky Steps here to get through the phase as fast as we could. It didn't help that Blizzard accidentally made the phase much harder at some point by giving it 3 extra stacks of the Chilling Touch debuff right as the intermission starts, just randomly. I don't know how or why they did this, but that's something they accidentally did. So during this time that this was happening, we opted to actually 6 heal, just so that we could really easily get through the phase and not have too many wipes to healing here. After they reverted that change, we did go back to 4 heal, and eventually we even dropped Sky Steps from this part of the fight, so that we would have DPS potions later, and instead we used the Shaman Windrush totems during this part. Phase 2 is pretty similar to Heroic. Once we'd worked out how to follow Scribe properly and the movement became natural to everyone, this phase was very easy. We could wipe right at the start of the phase due to spending too long in the intermission, or getting screwed with Icefall RNG, or one dangerous timing where a Siegebreaker comes during movement and we have high stacks, but apart from that, pretty easy. We even found that we were having to stop DPS quite often, so DPS wasn't an issue at all, and the healing check was only scary at those certain points, and was mostly very easy and mainly about saving mana for the last phase. The Water Elemental in the second intermission splits into more Water Elementals when you kill it on Mythic, so we were faced with quite a big dilemma. Do we kill the Water Elemental or do we leave it up? And do we get people ice blocked intentionally to break them out, or do we just nuke the boss? These were probably the biggest choices we had to make, and ultimately what enabled us to get world first I think here was making the right choice. We decided to leave the Water Ellie up and just have people that were debuffed with Heart of Frost move out of the raid, and we decided to just burn the boss rather than doing some sort of controlled strategy with the ice blocks. We did have some non-believers in the guild that said that we could not actually make the burn strat work, and we even found out after progress that Limit also didn't think that we could do the burn strat. They said that they thought it was impossible. However, in the end the burn strat was not only doable, but surprisingly easy. We had so much extra DPS in the last phase that they could have actually buffed the boss by 1 or 2% on her health, and we still would have killed it. We were just miles ahead. A key thing to make this burn strat work was that we decided to have most ranged blasting the boss while the ice wall was attackable, and this gained us a valuable extra 2 or 3% of the boss's health that just wasn't there in the last phase, so we just gained 2 or 3% of the boss's health just for free basically. We lusted during the ice wall to make this happen, and we actually had the raid cancel their bloodlust buff before we engaged JAINA so that she doesn't ice block, because she ice blocks if you are attacking her and you have bloodlust up. You can see that we also had Gingy do something quite cool, in which he goes on his own solo to interrupt Jaina and quickly gets back to us before he gets ice blocked. This saved us a lot of time and ultimately it saved us chilling touch stacks. As we were leaving up the images in the last phase, we had to bait the ice ray really well and position properly. This was really crucial. We had a few wipes to messing this up in the last phase, and this actually prevented us from killing the boss sooner. I think we could have killed the boss maybe 2 days sooner if we performed this properly, at least definitely the day before. But yeah, we did mess up a few times in those tries that we got to the last phase. Healing wise, we executed the phase perfectly, I would say. I have seen some other guilds struggle with just the healing requirement in the last phase, but it's mostly about CDs, and you can really see that we pre-planned our CDs really well. All you have to do is look at the raid frames in the last 20-30 seconds of the fight, and I mean it's just so stable. The last 20 seconds was carried by the Disc Priest. Basically they had barriers, like we chained the barriers, and their full ramp. If you don't know, Disc Priest full ramp does a lot of healing and damage at the same time, funnily enough, which I don't know if that's balanced, but yeah, Disc Priest was just absolutely blasting the last 20 seconds. I think Josh did over 100k HPS for the last 20 seconds. It's absolutely crazy. Another key thing in this phase was our choice to sacrifice the tanks. If the tanks get ice blocked, Jaina and all of her other images will shoot an icicle at them, which is deadly if anyone gets hit. We decided to sacrifice the tanks using battle reses, i.e. having soul stones on them already, or having Ankh totems down when they die, so that they never get intentionally ice blocked. And a nice side effect of this was that it also gave Narcoles on Ret Paladin a nice little damage buff, because they gain a damage buff when players die. We killed the boss after 346 attempts on the Tuesday, which was the day before the reset for us, and if we hadn't killed it on that day, Limit almost certainly would have won, because they get the extra reset of gear. They actually already had their reset when we killed the boss. They were re-clearing to get back to Jaina, so we were really only a few hours away from potentially losing. It was an absolute incredible feeling to claim world first on Jaina after being behind and expecting, and it being that close with them literally already having the reset. And it was made even more special by being with, all the guildmates and all the people at the Red Bull Gaming Sphere London. A big shout out to all our sponsors, all of the production staff at the Red Bull Gaming Sphere, everyone involved in planning and running the event in Method, all of my guildmates in Method, and to those of you who watched at home. It was an absolutely great experience all around, and it was just amazing. I've been Chris Potter. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content, and thanks for watching. Bye guys.